One thing I tell everybody is that motivation is a lie. It is a lie because the people that are successful are the people that get up day after day, no matter how much they failed the day before, and learn something new and apply that. When you stop, you fail. The only way you can lose is if you quit or if you don't start. That is true failure. To not get it this time and you get up and you learn from it and try again, that's success. You cannot have these false expectations of yourself. We have to really set viable goals. Now, is it possible to have a team come together over a project and meet that goal? Yes. Is it possible for someone to set a personal goal and get that done the first time? Absolutely. I've coached many teams that have done that. But somewhere in between, there's hiccups, there are impediments, there are roadblocks. So the important part, it's in taking a moment and having an honest conversation with yourself, your group, your team, your organization, finding out what went wrong and doing it better the next time. This is where the celebration and the success lies.
Welcome to Manager, a podcast about the experiences of people leaders and how we can enable them to lead engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams. I'm Kamaria Scott, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us as we learn, lead, and succeed together. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Manager. When we think about our role as people leaders, it is to help our team members be successful, to be the best version of themselves. Sometimes we can forget that the road to success and sometimes perfection is also filled with occasional failure. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about how do we use failure to help our teams move forward, to help people grow, and to maybe even think about what it says about us as people leaders. I am excited to introduce you to today's guest, Coletrice Haywood, who's going to share how she helps teams use failure to move forward. So welcome to the show.
Super excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. If you would, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what kind of work you do with teams.
My name is Coletrice Haywood. I come from humble beginnings here in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Family comes from a small country town with parents and grandparents who were advocates of education. I have my bachelor's in business because a business degree is what people who can't decide on what they want to do, that's what you get. That or liberal arts, and I have a degree in that too. But I fell upon project management by proxy of a developer boot camp and fell in love with Agile methodologies and frameworks that help teams, organizations, individuals move forward in a way that is healthy and shows revenue growth. And then two, can also show some personal growth too. I got my MBA with a minor in project management and will be completing my doctorate hopefully by the end of March 2025. I'll be Dr. Haywood. So I'm really excited about that. And it'll be a doctorate in organizational development and leadership, a slew of certifications, worked in private sector, government, consulting, fintech. All in all, my passion is just to see people win.
Love it. First, congratulations in advance on your doctorate. I cannot wait to come back in a month and celebrate your success.
Yes.
And I love the breadth of your experience. I'm somebody who also has been through a bunch of different industries. And what I always think is so cool about that is you start to see the commonality in things. You know, a lot of times people are like, oh, because we're in this industry, we have this problem. But when you've had that breadth of experience, you can tell like, oh no, this leadership problem is persistent across industry. So I want to maybe start there and ask, how has your breadth of experience in organizations shaped how you think about failure and how it drives leaders and their teams?
Oh, wow. How I think about leaders and their teams and how it influences them. I have a long relationship with failure because I come from very humble beginnings. If people don't know what that means, I was poor. As we say it in the country, I was po. My mom did her very, very best and raised us as best she could, but it gave me a perspective that I carry into business.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, money is correlated with success. And having had none, I thought that that was true as a child. But as I progressed in business, I realized that that is not true because I see and have worked with people who are financially stable, but feel like failures or maybe failing in a part of their life that they wish they were better in. But even in that, especially in adopting agile methodologies, you see that failure is not what it is on its face. And I talk about this a lot, especially as it correlates to American culture. We always want to win. We want to win the first time. We want the game winning shot, even though we never played basketball a day in our lives. We want this miraculous teen movie ending to everything we start with. But that doesn't happen every time.
Yes.
And so instead of thinking, oh, I didn't get that game winning shot, it's like, dang it, I tried. I was bold enough to get out before whomever and try. I don't think we celebrate enough the effort that happens behind doing the thing as much as were you successful at it.
Where I see that often come up is when we're doing performance appraisals and at the end of the year, all we care about, were you successful, right? And
Yeah.
the conversation can miss, did you grow? Did you learn? What happened? You can miss the full story when you're just outcome oriented. When you said we want that teen movie ending, I'm always thinking about the basketball game at the last minute, the person like shoots from the free throw line to get to the game winning shot. Those moments are few and far between. People don't typically have those types of moments, but it's what we've ingrained in our minds as success. There are so many other things other than the outcome that we can be celebrating. What would you say is a better way to start thinking about success and the things we should be celebrating if it's not that game winning shot?
One thing I tell everybody is that motivation is a lie. It is a lie because the people that are successful are the people that get up day after day, no matter how much they failed the day before, and learn something new and apply that. When you stop, you fail. The only way you can lose is if you quit or if you don't start. That is true failure. To not get it this time and you get up and you learn from it and try again, that's success. You cannot have these false expectations of yourself. We have to really set viable goals. Now, is it possible to have a team come together over a project and meet that goal? Yes. Is it possible for someone to set a personal goal and get that done the first time? Absolutely. I've coached many teams that have done that. But somewhere in between, there's hiccups, there are impediments, there are roadblocks. So the important part, it's in taking a moment and having an honest conversation with yourself, your group, your team, your organization, finding out what went wrong and doing it better the next time. This is where the celebration and the success lies.
When you say there's the only failure is not to try.
Only failure is not to try. That's the only failure, not to try or to quit.
Yeah.
There's the only failure. I believe it was Ed Sheeran. He shared his, like, one of his early videos, like when he was doing a gig, and he showed it, he put it on his Instagram to show his progress because he kept practicing. And how does that relate to management? I truly believe that when it comes to leaders, especially in this environment, you can only give the grace to others that you give to yourself.
Mm.
And there are a lot of people who lack that for themselves. There is a level of understanding that you do have to give and perception so that you can fill gaps and risks and so forth.
So it's interesting that you say that as leaders, we have to examine our own relationship with failure. When you talked about Ed Sheeran, it was interesting to me because what jumped out to me about that was like, we all suck at things in the beginning.
Yes, we do.
No matter what it is. One of my good friends, Ben, he always says we all suck in the beginning when it comes to being people leaders. And it's true. No matter what it is, when you start from day one, even if you have some sort of natural talent affinity for something, you're still not going to be great at it. You're not going to be a success. You have to know that the journey to getting to that success is going to be some failures. And so there was a time when Ed Sheeran, all caps, big lights, was just Ed Sheeran the guitar. And there's something in that about the acknowledgement that the progression to getting to success has a pathway or some phases that we may go through that help us understand the journey. Does that resonate at all? Or should I make that up in my head?
Absolutely. I'll give a scenario. I was working with a team and they had a leader that had exited. There were a lot of gaps in the team. And the number one thing was communication. There was a bit of an issue with skill set we had found. Because of that, they weren't finishing their projects. There was conflict between departments within the team. We facilitated some conversations. Along the way, we had a big failure at the first quarter of a delivery. And what we had was a retrospective. It's normal within Agile methodology. We had to have a very honest conversation about where is this going wrong? That conversation was hard. There were a lot of awkward silences. Everybody remained professional, but what came out of that was a team of people who couldn't stand each other in the beginning. After that conversation, they became a group of people who, number one, felt freedom to communicate, blockers. They were able to see things from each other's perspective. When they were delivering work from one department to another, they did it with a level of understanding. And not only that, our documentation stepped up too. The next delivery, we delivered on time, but that would not have happened unless we had failed that first time, unless that first delivery was unsuccessful. Sometimes things need to break, and we shouldn't see that as a failure. That is honestly an opportunity. It's an opportunity to hone our skills, to cross-train, to communicate in a way that a lot of teams probably haven't, and what we need to do.
I love that you mentioned Ed Sheeran and the video of him way back in the day, because it's really funny. I remember, internally there was a podcast that I had created and we were so proud of that first episode. And then we went back and listened to it at the end of the season and we were like, oh my goodness, that's different. And it reminds me that like Ed Sheeran, flashy lights, big arenas is who we see today. But this video, Ed Sheeran was probably Ed Sheeran, picking up a guitar, learning it from the beginning and just starting to develop as an artist. And if we think about it, I'm sure there are some failures along the way. Do you think there was a progression of how he developed as an artist or how we all develop as we learn to be successful?
Absolutely. I think there's basic that we all will go through. And I'll speak just internally to myself, especially after I didn't know anything about Agile. In fact, I didn't even want to be a project manager. It was the last thing on my list. I thought it was boring work. I didn't be tied up in meetings and ended up learning more about it and loving it. When people come to me about project management, and especially when they say on these job titles, why do they want 2 to 5 years on a entry level job? Why is HR saying that? They are not saying that they really want 2 to 5 years. They're looking for. And so what does that look like? When you look at jobs, they're looking for a level of expertise when they say 2 to 5 years, even on entry level. And that you can do in your, you want to display that in your resume and interview. Beyond that, what they're actually saying is these three things and these three phases. When you first come into any phase, you have knowledge. And that could be your certifications, the books you read, going onto YouTube, or being certified at Google University. As you continue to learn and develop, you'll become more of an expert where you know a lot, but you haven't exercised those things. But the level that you want to get to is expertise. And I immediately think about chess players when I talk about this. Expertise is someone who's put their knowledge in play and you almost become intuitive about the thing that you're doing. For example, I can sit in on meetings and identify gaps and risks, communication failures, or opportunities that a board will have to make things better for their constituents. That is expertise. And why I correlate that to chess players is because it takes a lot to become a grandmaster in chess. You have to play a lot of games. It doesn't mean you win them all. It means aggressively get better. You build your reputation. You build, like I said, your intuitiveness to know, if you play this one, I'm going to play this one. They'll probably only have like 5 moves if they go here. But that's that level you want to get to. Unfortunately, you will not get there having successes or wins all the way. So it is important psychologically that you reframe those things you're doing. You didn't fail, you tried. And I'm not trying to give people a participation award. I know a lot of people don't like that. You really have to celebrate the fact that you had the audacity to get out there, do it.
I remember when we went through the whole phase of people shouldn't get participation trophies. I remember just in real life, my uncle and I were having a conversation and I was going through a life transition. I remember him saying, you should celebrate that you put 2 feet on the floor today and you went out into the world because somebody didn't. And I always say, you can't win if you don't play. And so people having the opportunity to get in whatever life game we're playing, I agree with you that requires a little bit of celebration. And even as I think about leading my teams, growth is having the courage to do something you haven't done before. I can think of teams where I've led where I've had to nudge and encourage and coach people into simply trying the thing before we had even a conversation about whether or not they were going to be successful at it. So I agree with you. I think that not necessarily giving participation trophies, but acknowledging efforts is really important. When I teach managers about recognition, I say you have to recognize everyday moments, milestones, and major events. Because if you miss the things that happen every day, you don't magically get to the major event at the end without some stops. I like that you put it into perspective of this sort of journey, this awareness of people start with just first having knowledge. They then develop, become experts, and then they have expertise. If managers viewed development and performance through this lens, how might it help them or influence how they build their teams?
I think it'll give them a more human experience. It also makes it easier to deliver difficult information.
Okay.
I think it was a Gallup poll that said people who take career risks report higher job satisfaction. Taking those risks and putting yourself out there to try as a manager yourself will help your career. It gives you empathy and it helps you identify leaders in your own team. You have a more human experience. I've had some people take some crazy risks that worked for them. But meanwhile, when they were telling me, I think we should try this, I'm like, okay, we can try it. It helped me to advocate for them when they were down. Even when I had a team that had a project that didn't go as planned, I was able to have that conversation and pick them back up and encourage them. To be able to pick up and encourage a team in this climate is a skill that is very, very valuable.
It is. And what you said reminds me of something, I would say the team is going to be on a limb. And that means we're going to be out here doing some wild, new, crazy thing. And in that, though, there's always this acknowledgement that, it may not be successful. What if it doesn't work? There is the air you create around that. 'Cause if people only operated in environments where they knew they wouldn't fail, where there was no risk, you would literally have what you have now.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't have anything different or better. When I start thinking about advocating for the team, creating the environment where they feel like it's okay, like we're going to try a thing. If it fails, it fails. And it's making me think of a number of conversations where people would be like, well, but what if it's unsuccessful? And I just shrug it off and say, we've learned something.
we've learned what didn't work and we're going to move on to what does. And it encourages them to try again. I do absolutely like it resonates with me what you're saying. People may try crazy things. There's risk involved in that. There's potential for failure, but there's also that like, but what if we get it right? What if our team is successful? Then what?
What I've noticed that the biggest part of that is I will have team members who, when you trust them to make a risk, and you can make calculated risk, you can have your MVP in that risk or initiative. So we at least are delivering the minimum product that our customer wants, but they will start to give you ideas and help shed some light on the things that should be done that leadership could be blind to. Long story short, they help you innovate. That's how I know the team is over the hump and they're a self-organizing team. They're communicating, collaborating, and innovating. When they get to a place where the customer is like, hey, we want this, this, and this, and we get our marching orders, and you have somebody say, hey, wait a minute, we can't put this drop down here because of these things. I know they want it, but we can't. How about we do this differently? And that'll help this department and that department. That's fantastic. Because they felt open enough to switch it up a bit. And they found an opportunity to make things better. And they were able to speak up. The magic that can happen within teams. But that doesn't happen unless you create those spaces.
You definitely mentioned how when the team is sort of clicking on all cylinders, you get that innovation, you get them anticipating the client needs. It makes me think that the people leader, their role or responsibility in this is creating the environment for all of this to happen. Sometimes being able to do that forces us to examine our own relationship with failure, because it's scary when I talk to people leaders and why they maybe don't allow for the risk or don't allow the teams to own things is because they are afraid of the failure themselves. So not necessarily even for the team member, but the responsibility that I am responsible for this ultimately. And so me saying it's okay if you fail might feel uncomfortable for me as a people leader. And I wonder if you can share any insight into that.
I would actually ask that person, how much do you believe in yourself and your ability? And if you're in an environment where you're comfortable, because that probably is not the case, the advice that I would have to that particular person would be standing on a statistic that I read. I think it was Harvard Business Review, where it said bold decision makers are 79% more likely to be promoted than those who do not. If you're not willing to step out there for yourself, that will bleed over into your team and how you manage them. I would encourage that person to adopt another Agile practice, which would be iterative change. Just small steps towards that bigger thing. If it's a large risk, what is a calculated risk that you can take? If it is to change that thing from red to black, is there a purple in between that you can deal with to test that thing out?
So what I love about what you're saying, like you are a project manager, you've seen teams, many of them, success, fail in many stages. And so if we're trying to maybe help teams come to terms that failure is in fact a part of the development, the growth, the success of your team, how would we do that? So as people leaders, we tend to be failure avoidant, right? Even if it's because we ourselves don't like to fail, if it's because our teams, we have responsibilities, but we know that it's inherent to what it is that we have to do. So how do we maybe create a process, or how do we deal with failure in a productive way in our teams?
So Agile methodologies, they teach us that we want to fail and fail fast. There's a few keys to that. You want to try the thing. If it doesn't work, you're able to switch course very quickly and get right back on track, because we can't say that those things won't happen. Once you do that, you can realign your team. You can realign that goal. But there are several things that need to happen in between that. Number one, you need to communicate. You need to be honest about the thing and say, hey, I always say this, and it's within the confines of my team, y'all, that kind of sucked. That didn't go right this time. And then you want to go ahead and talk about what exactly did go wrong. It's going to get awkward. It's going to get quiet. And you need to embrace that awkwardness until people start to speak, congratulate them, and thank them for being honest about what went wrong. Because we always want to talk about the happy part. And that's not always the best part to talk about. Then you want to talk about what went right and make sure people continue to talk about that. And here's the important part. What do we want to change? Now that we've said out loud and we have it here in front of us, write it down, put it on a whiteboard, put it somewhere digitally. What went right? What went wrong? What do we want to change? How can we change it so that the next time we do this, we're successful? A few things are happening there. First of all, hopefully the next time the team has to have a hard conversation, you're breaking that barrier down so that the awkwardness and the silence doesn't happen for so long. You're also getting different perspectives and you're charting a new path. From there, you can get some action items going. Action items need to happen within that session. Don't just leave and say, okay, well, we know what happened. Bye. No, you want to get action items. What are we going to do? What can we do together to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Those are the things that you definitely want to do, especially as a project manager. I don't care if you're Agile coach, product owner, Scrum master, wherever you fit in the framework. Those things are very important. And these are things you can do anywhere too.
Yeah, even if I'm not necessarily a project manager, as people leaders, if we're in a small organization and we don't have a PMO office, we are the project manager oftentimes for our teams. Anytime a team receives a project, congratulations. If you're a people leader, you're now also the project manager. And there's so many things that we can pull into our personal leadership from Agile methodology, from project managers, which is why I'm so excited that you're here talking to us. Because I think sometimes leaders don't recognize that we are, in fact, project managers. And there are behaviors and habits that we can borrow, adopt. Like I'm always like, steal a good idea. If you see somebody doing something that works, pull it into your team and how you lead a team. Just because you're not a scrum master doesn't mean you can't run a retrospective. But I do want to get them caught up. So if they're going to borrow something from Agile methodology and pull it into how they lead their teams, can you give us a crash course in what are a couple of the things that would be helpful to them?
Yeah, absolutely. 3 things you can do. I don't care what industry you are in. I don't care if you do this in your house with your kids. Number 1, daily stand up. Normally in Agile methodologies, this happens in the morning. It depends on what shift. It normally starts at the beginning of a shift. You want to spend 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Here's the thing. 15 minutes psychologically for people is something that they can grasp. It's enough time for you to get information, ask questions, and people don't feel like you've taken so much of their day. Everybody's had that 30-minute meeting that turned into, what does SpongeBob say, 4 days later?
Yes.
In that daily stand-up, that 15 minutes, you gather your team and they talk about what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and what blockers they have. What is keeping them from getting their job done? The reason you gather your whole team is so they can communicate with one another. They understand what each other is doing. Just in case Bob is doing the same thing that Sally is, one of them, they can pair together or split the task. Or Bob can tell Sally, oh, you don't have to send that email. I talked to him yesterday. It's done. And they get to understand their roles and responsibilities in an organization. I'm sure we've all been in one where there's overlap in roles and responsibilities, and that helps people to work together as a group better. Number 2, definitely a retrospective. My family has retrospectives after a vacation, okay? And I'll give you an example. We went to Florida and we came back and I was like, man, that was an awesome vacation. If we go back, what do you guys want to do again? And what do you guys not want to do? And it's just that simple. And we talked about in the framework of a project that didn't go well. But even when it goes well, what do we want to keep doing? Like, hey, it was great that, Tasha, we loved it when you documented all of our processes while we were in the midst of the project, that was in real time. Those things are important. Have that retrospective. You can ask 3 questions. What went right? What went wrong? What do we want to change? Here are some keys to having a good retrospective. Please do it without blame and finger pointing. You will get nowhere. You will cause a fight. Security will come to your job. You want to give yourself grace because you have to be able to give it to yourself to know how to give it to others. You can't give what you don't have. And then you want to talk about what didn't go right without blame. You have to do it in a spirit of professionalism and honesty. Have action items and follow up on them immediately, and let your team know that you as a manager are following up on them. If it was that, hey, Mr. Manager, we had a cutover happen digitally and nobody from the department communicated with us. So I'll go back to powder keg. It'll be a powder keg. So what's important is regarding the action items. It is so important that your team sees you as the manager following up on them immediately and communicating that you followed up on them immediately. If it was an email that didn't get sent out, if it was something that didn't get delivered on time, you need to let them know as soon as those action items are out. Hey, team, I heard you. And I want you to know that the action item that you said regarding this thing, I emailed Bob and we have a communication plan out. So next time that won't happen. Or the deliveries will go out better because I let inventory know that we need to keep up on this particular widget. And I just want you guys to know this is how you follow up on it next time. When you do that, you reinforce to the team that what they're saying actually has impact and communicates change. It's so important. The third thing, there's a ceremony in Agile called refinement. It's where the group goes over the work they're going to do, and they talk about how difficult is it? What is the risk? What are the dependencies? Is that different than what I put? What was the other one? What are the risks? They talk about what are the risks? What are the dependencies? What are the gaps that we see here? And normally we use Fibonacci to score it, or you can use t-shirt sizes. You can use Avengers to score the work. That process can be led into any part of business. So how can you take refinement and fit it into what you're doing if you're in construction? Because refinement is not just about the thing, but it's also about the person who is assigned to do it. So if a person doesn't have a skill set, let's say, Kamaria, you're a fantastic leader and you've been leading people for years. Let's say that same old Bob, Mr. Bob, is new to leadership and he's doing the same tasks you're doing. And let's say you say, you know what, putting this together for this group, if I had to give it a score, I'd give it a 1. And Bob has that same thing. He was like, oh my gosh, I would put this at a 13, a 20, or 100. And then you say, this is what's important with refinement. Why? Kamaria, why is this so easy for you? Can you explain to us what you're doing that makes it a 1? And then Bob, can you explain to us your process and why it's a 13? Or Kamaria, you can say, oh, this is an extra small. And Bob can say, oh, this is an extra large. Kamaria can say, well, I've done this for years. So I know I can talk to Patty from Human Resources and she'll give me this documentation and I'll send it to that person. Whereas Bob may be the newer person and doesn't know who to talk to, where the documentation is, where to file it. And so doing that, you all are training each other in real time.
What I really love about what you just gave us with refinement is it full circle back to when you were talking about knowledge, expert, and expertise. In that conversation, what I heard was the first example, I'm an expertise level, so it's a 1 for me.
Exactly.
He might be at a knowledge level, so it's an extra medium for him. If I am a people leader, having this conversation allows me to think about what level of support does this person need? Going back to how do I advocate for them? But even then, how do I actually help minimize their risk of failure? Because seeing all of the variables that could help them be successful or create roadblocks, and it positions me to better support their performance and success. I really love that. I don't do that with my teams. I've never done that, but I'm going to steal that one.
No, I mean, it also helps you with resource management because that person now learns who to go to for what. You know how people do on jobs now. They just say, oh, go shadow with Tina. You sit there for 2 hours and you're like, I didn't learn anything.
Carry on.
All I got was a headache from straining, looking over somebody's shoulder at a computer screen. In real time, that particular individual learns that Kamaria knows a lot. Kamaria, can you show me that document? Can you put it in a repository so I can read it? Can I watch you do it once? Can you introduce me to Tina? Can you help me with that? As a manager, what that does is it helps your team become self-organizing, which is the goal of any Agilist, to become self-organizing, where they are operating with very little intervention. All you're doing is keeping the boat steady, and they know how to talk to each other. They know how to help one another and exchange resources.
Yeah.
They're also familiar with what each other does in their skill set. So where person A is deficient in a certain amount of knowledge and person B is insufficient, they can couple together and say, hey, can you help me on this? Because I have to go do this thing today and I don't really know how to execute. If we work together, we can get it done quickly.
And what I hear in that, taking individual success and turning that into collective and team success. It's interesting, right? Because a lot of times as leaders, we don't necessarily know how to do that. We know how we have these different people that have these different skill sets. We talk about strengths. We may do a strengths assessment, but even around the awareness of people's individual strengths is how do you turn that into team and group success? And so what I hear you saying is actually there are habits, practices, things that you can do that when done repeatedly over time, help people learn how to leverage each other, how to support one another, who they can go to. And you're then, again, increasing the likelihood of success. You're sort of minimizing the occurrence of failure, but you've also built in a mechanism for if that failure occurs, here's how we productively deal with it so that we can move on to it and get back to the road to success.
Yeah, and then have constructive communication. Like I said before, just as individuals, like in our day-to-day lives, we're not going to win every time. And to expect that out of your group is unrealistic. I wonder what your relationship with that group would be. I doubt that it is absolutely positive. But if you allow them an opportunity in a space where they can fail fast, understand what they did wrong, recalibrate, and try again, I'm telling you, you are going to have a successful group, successful department, and a successful organization. All I'm basically saying is be a human, be a human being, just be a person. What this process actually does as your team continues to grow is that they'll become lean in efficiency. They will become very efficient because they will find innovation at every turn and they're not scared to make decisions. By doing that, you are creating better professionals. You'll be a better boss. And if you trust people to do their job and give them autonomy, I'll tell you what, I remember every boss that did not give me autonomy, did not trust me to do my job. I also remember every boss that gave me autonomy and trusted me to do my job. For all of them, I worked my butt off. But for the ones that gave me trust and autonomy, I have rocketed in my career. And we still keep in contact. I've never forgot them because they have been pillars to my success.
I love that. I think that is a wonderful parting thought for people. That when you create an opportunity and give them autonomy, you are propelling their growth. It's through that autonomy that they take those risks. They thrive, they fail, they have those experiences. But that's really how we let them grow by giving them space to figure it out and the tools to be able to navigate successfully when it works, but also the tools to be able to navigate successfully when it doesn't work, but the celebration and encouragement when it does work. So On behalf of
Mhm.
our listeners, Coletrice, I want to thank you for giving us your time and your expertise today. We have learned so much. Every people leader is a project manager, whether they realize it or not. And you've given us this amazing crash course in how we can overcome our maybe own relationship with failure, but how we can embrace it and welcome it as a natural part of getting to success and making sure that our teams are healthy and high performing. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to learn more about you and how you support teams, is LinkedIn the best way to do that?
Yeah, just find me on LinkedIn. I promise you I'm the only Coletrice in LinkedIn. I
I bet.
promise you. That's spelled Coletrice and Haywood, Haywood.
Wonderful. I will put your LinkedIn contact information in the show notes. And for my people leaders listening, I hope what you will take away from this episode is that yes, failure is a part of leading teams. It's a part of our projects. It happens all the time. But there are practices, habits, ways for you to embrace those potential failures to help your teams learn and grow from those failures and to make sure that they're able to be resilient and find their way to success. I hope that you're able to find ways to pull in those three key behaviors that Khalid just mentioned into how you are leading your teams. So until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other, and we will see you again on Manager to Manager.